All right, folks, we are live.
We're live. Hello, hello. It is 4 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock Mountain, 7 o'clock on the East Coast, midnight in Dublin, 1 a.m. here in Italy. It's 1 a.m. I'm in Italy tonight or today, and it's Facebook Live. And I want to begin by saying hello to the Benson family in Iowa. Gracie and little Quincy. Quincy is, I believe, 10 years old. I think I've got that right now, Quincy. Let me know if I have it right. And they watch every week. And that picture that you sent me of Quincy sitting there at the kitchen table at dinner time, just getting ready for dinner, but always staring at the laptop and watching Facebook Live every week to learn more about how to be healthy. And today's guest and the talk is one that relates directly to people who are closer to the soil, people who are farmers and growing their own crops. And it's a topic that we all need to understand because it's a life-giving topic and a life-threatening topic, both. So this is wonderful. Our guest today is Katie Oglesby, and Katie is an edible garden designer and holistic health coach on a mission to help her clients stop being passive participants in their health journeys and become courageous, informed advocates for their well-being. Way to go. What a great introduction that is. As a garden coach and real food advocate, she fuses the healing power of gardening with the healing power of food as medicine in her garden designs, and holistic approach to living. A garden-to-table lifestyle, living a garden-to-table lifestyle, inspiring you to live nourished from the roots up. And I'm very excited to be talking about this topic tonight. So let me welcome you. Hello, Katie. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So some people don't understand or may have not heard much about this topic. So let me just begin, because most everyone here knows a little bit how important the microbiome in the gut is. That 36% of all of the small molecules in healthy blood are the exhaust of the microbiome in our gut, the bacteria and the viruses in our gut. That's the exhaust. And it's 36% of everything in the bloodstream, because those are the messengers that are going to the brain, telling the brain how many hormones to make, the different types of hormones, going to the heart, telling the heart how hard to beat, going to the lungs, going to the liver, that these messengers are turning genes on or calming genes down. I always say genes don't operate on an on-off switch. They operate on dimmer switches. And that the messages from the bacteria in the gut have their hands on the dimmer switch, turning genes up or turning genes down, which means, are the genes of inflammation up, or are the genes of inflammation calming down? And more of the genes of anti-inflammation are turning up. Most people here today know this. They've heard this enough from us in the past. How does that concept relate to the soil?
So that's a great question. So the soil is actually the plant's external microbiome. So the soil is sorting things for the plant so the plant can take what nutrients it needs to make high quality food. So when you think about the parallel between our microbiome and the soil, that's why it's super important that soil quality matters when it comes to the nutrient density of our food, because that is doing all the work for the plant like our microbiome is doing for us.
So if the good guys in the soil are sending messages up into the plant, turning on the genes to grow healthier, stronger plants, make more of the polyphenols, the ingredients in plants that we eat that make us stronger. The more polyphenols, the better. That's why we talk about the rainbow diet. It is the colors of the rainbow, because those are the polyphenols in the plants. If the soil has its own microbiome that affects the plants. How are we doing today with most of the food that's available to people?
I mean, we're doing very poorly. Our topsoil has eroded significantly depending on what study you read or where we are geographically. And conventional farming has stripped our soil. We have not put organic matter and things back into it. So that's why it's really important that if you can even grow a small amount of your own food, that you're in control of that base, that quality that plant needs from the get-go. So while organic farming is great and we all need that, we can even do a better job at home.
That's really an important concept. I was really startled first by the study that I've mentioned a couple of times in the past, but then within this study, how little it took to have a positive benefit. So the study's in the Journal of the American Medical Association, and they looked at couples who had gone to assisted fertility centers. And the editors of the journal wrote comment that said, this is an elegant study using sophisticated biomarkers to prove their point. Now, the editors of the Journal of the American Medical Association don't say that very often. This is the big dog journal out there in the world, and for the editors to give a stamp of approval, that told me that, whether I agree or not, I better listen to what this study says. Mm-hmm. And what they did was they ruled out all of the traditional factors that they look at for success with implantation and pregnancy. Things like obesity, cigarette smoking, exercise, alcohol consumption. They ruled out all of those factors. They were able to do that in an elegant way. And they looked at the quality of the food as to how many fruits and vegetable servings a day a person was eating, and were they conventional fruits and vegetables or were they organic? And what they found was that those eating the highest amount of fruits and vegetables a day, conventional fruits and vegetables, the higher the amount of conventional fruits and vegetables, the worse the outcome. That the more fruits and vegetables people were eating, those in the highest category of fruits and vegetable consumption compared to those in the lowest category of fruits and vegetable consumption, if they were eating conventional, meaning they bought them at the local supermarket, in the highest category, they had an 18% less likelihood of getting pregnant. 18%. And these are couples spending tens of thousands of dollars. But the real kicker was, if they did get pregnant, those in the highest category of fruit and vegetable consumption, conventional, they had a 26% less likelihood of a live birth, meaning they lost the baby, they lost the pregnancy, or they had stillbirth. The more fruits and vegetables they ate, the worse the outcome. Now that just startled everybody. It's like, what? And the editors of the journal said this was an elegant study using sophisticated biomarkers. And it's like, what? How is that possible? But when they looked at the couples eating organic fruits and vegetables, highest category versus the lowest category, it was the exact opposite. Much more success, the higher the amount of fruits and vegetables that were organic. But here's the kicker. They were classified as eating organic fruits and vegetables if they were eating 3 servings a week. 3 meals a week where the vegetables were organic. 3 meals a week out of 21 meals. If 3 of them were organic, they had the complete opposite result. So you don't have to eat organic in every meal to have benefit. Of course, the more the better, but you don't have to have organic to, every meal to get good results. And I went through all of that because if you're talking about home gardening, and what this study tells us, even a little bit has a profound impact. So can you tell us more now about what you mean about home gardening?
Yeah, so I think you just kind of segued really into what I wanted to talk about. So just for example, salad greens. Salad greens are the easiest things, one of the easiest things we can grow, and they require small spaces. But when we look like just particularly here in the US, 98% of our salad greens are grown in 2 locations, California and Arizona. So when we think about that, they're being trucked. They're probably over 1,500 miles before they reach our plate. They're marginal by the time they get to us from a quality standpoint. And so that's one of the things I like to encourage people. I mean, they're testing positive of at least 2 pesticides on them per green. And it's one of the easiest things that we can grow, even if we have small spaces, even if we don't have a big in-ground garden. And it's one of the better things for us to get those healthy, clean greens, and we can grow them without any chemicals very economically. So I think that's one of the things that we can really think about is greens and or microgreens can be in a planter on your patio table. It can be very simple to add a few of those servings in a week.
Now, when you talk about on a patio or in a garden, many people don't have garden space. Mm-hmm. How do you do this? I mean, are people limited? They have to have a big indoor, like a room to do this?
No, so greens actually need a minimum of 6 hours of sunlight. So there we have kind of overcome people that have shady places. You can buy a planter on Amazon or wherever you're at, as long as it's 8 inches deep. We just did a salad bowl class. It was 18 inches around and planted 2 different salad bowl planters. And they were able to alternate between the 2 for a month and have some fresh greens. And so it requires, again, 6 hours of light. So whether you want to put that outside on your patio, you want a small grow light inside, or if you have a sunny room, sometimes ambient light is sufficient, but it doesn't take a lot of space. Doesn't take a lot of money. Seeds are very economical for greens. And it's a quick harvest. Spinach and arugula, for example, are ready in 30 days. So it's a very quick turnover as far as what we can grow, even just a little bit.
Wow. Wow. Now, I've seen these indoor gardens that have, they're about 6 feet tall, you know, and there are these like tubes and holes in the tubes, and you plant your seeds or your plants in those things. Is that what you're talking about?
No, well, so that's hydroponically. So you can definitely grow greens hydroponically. I'm a fan of getting my hands in the dirt, like even in the winter in Wisconsin when I can't be outside. And so I like to plant mine in a high quality compost. So I'm still getting my hands in the dirt when I'm planting. And so a simple pot or planter window box, filling with some fresh compost, planting some lettuce or spinach or arugula seeds or something like that will do the trick. And you can do it inside or outside.
Wow. Okay. So a planter, like, you know, this little planter thing that, like if you have a balcony, it's like the flower box on a balcony.
Correct.
That kind of thing.
You get very creative because they're very easy to grow. Like I said, low light requirement, just got to keep them watered, and it's very doable for most people.
And is there a timing to this? You know, see, I'm thinking I know nothing about this field, so it's great because, you know, I'm asking the questions I think that anyone's going to ask who really doesn't have a reality on this. So, and people will start putting their questions in, but I can use like a planter and put a stick in the ground to have vines growing up on the stick and things like that.
You can put a little trellis in. You can get creative with what sticks you want to put in. That's the beauty of it. So greens, just we'll do a quick short lesson, are cool season. So they like a little bit of the cooler weather, but there's other things that like it when it's really hot out. And when you said climbing, there's something called a Malabar spinach, and it loves to climb. It's beautiful on your patio, and it kind of gives you that break in between if you're in a really hot climate or a few hot months. It thrives on heat. So that's one of the things that you can implement when you're maybe in an off season from when these lettuces don't love really hot, intense weather, heat, or if you're on a patio, you have the ability to move that salad bowl into some shade and give it a little bit of a break. It's very versatile.
You know, we the home that we're in, the kitchen window there were a couple of nice, maybe 4-foot windows, and I just took them out and I put a bay window in there at the kitchen sink. And it's about, I guess about 4 feet wide or so, or long. And we put a bay window in there. And then we just put pots in the bay window on the other side of the kitchen sink that are growing a lot of herbs, oregano and basil and things. And it's so cool because we just keep flipping off a little bit to use, in our cooking, and it keeps growing. So I'm thinking that, if you're talking about greens, are we talking about weeks and weeks or months of effort to have a harvest that's gone in a few days? Or is there a timing to this as to how long edible components of plants are available?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So lettuce and greens do have a lifespan. So you're going to probably harvest off of them for a few weeks before they're either kind of going to get bolt or kind of die out. So I like to tell clients or people to have 2 going, start one, and then 2 to 3 weeks later, start another. So for example, picture a 4x4 section, which is about 16 square feet. My husband and I can eat salad out of that every day for a month in 16 square. So when you think about that, a 4x4 section is not that big, whether it's a little raised bed or you have a couple pots. So just for some perspective, and that'll last us about a month. We'll start harvesting them when they're baby. And then I succession plant and I start again to make sure I have this. So having 2 going at the same time is a great way to keep your harvest going. So like I said, spinach and arugula are 30 days. Lettuce can be about 50 days till it gets to full size, but that doesn't mean you can't harvest as you go. So one tip or trick that people may not know is when you're harvesting herbs or greens is you harvest around the outside of the plant first, because it's going to encourage growth to come up from the center and to keep giving for us. So when you have a spinach plant or an herb, when you harvest around that base, you're going to continue to encourage growth.
Jane has a good question. What do you think about using animal manure as a soil fertilizer? It seems gross to me, but would love to hear what benefits there are using manure, if any.
So manure is a great fertilizer. It is. There's just a couple caveats to that. Is if it is possible that if the animals were grazing on fields that had herbicides or pesticides, I have heard stories where when people have used that in their garden, have had subpar years and it's killed plants because that transfers actually through. So that's just one thing to be mindful of. Not that I haven't used manures before when we've grown, but that is a risk or possibility.
Okay. Jill's on Facebook and she says, I keep trying to plant lettuce, but it dies off in a week. I live in Southern California. I just tried to plant again in our temperate 70s weather, and the plants died again. How often should they be watered? I planted small plants, not seeds.
So you should be checking daily. You should be watering, especially in Southern California. If you're starting with seeds, you want to keep them moist through germination. One of the things I like to say is if the plants are small, to always use your finger and test the soil. If your finger comes out clean, it's too dry. But as they're baby, the soil is not going to be, that root system's not very deep. So you're going to go deeper and deeper as the plant gets bigger to really test the moisture. Your best indicator is to use your hands to test.
Well, that's really a good answer, because who would think, you put your finger in there and it comes out and there's a little bit of dirt. Okay, it's moist enough for now. And 2 weeks later, you put your finger at the same depth, but the roots are going deeper now, yes. Right? So yes. We wouldn't think of that. I mean, those are the pearls that come from doing this for a while and learning from it. Mary asks, if I want to get started with gardening and supplementing my groceries, what do you recommend to get started? What should I consider as far as what to grow? What other things do I have to consider?
So first determining how you're going to grow, whether you're going to grow in containers, raised beds, or in ground. So you should determine that factor first. And then 2, determining when you start what season you're in. So we have 4 seasons: cold, cool, warm, and hot. Most geographical locations grow within 3 seasons. So like here in Wisconsin, right now I'm in cool season. And so understanding what vegetables grow best in your seasons is going to increase your likelihood for success. So like right now, greens love cool seasons. So it's a great thing to start with. Greens and herbs are an entryway into gardening. They're the easiest things to start with.
And for everyone out there, Katie has a garden to table masterclass, and we're going to put the link in here for you for that. And it's there's a digital guidebook that comes with it. It's a 4-part video series walking you through how to best utilize this 440-page guidebook. So all these little pearls that we're hearing here right now, you know, there's 140 pages of this. Can you tell us a little about this video series that you have?
Yes, of course. So I created the guidebook to help people start with gardening and making sure we're bringing it to the table. So there's sections that will walk you through the seasons, like we just talked about, understanding your frost dates. It lays out what vegetables grow best, so you can kind of map out your season. I talk about all my preservation tips, harvesting, nutrient support, and then there's calendars and guides in there for you to kind of track your progress. And just, it's a great way to start out gardening. It'll give you the foundation that you need, and you'll kind of be able to track your success as you go through the book. And then again, I have recipes and preservation tips at the end to make sure that we're bringing that to the table.
Now, if we're doing indoor gardening, does it matter what the weather's like outside? I mean, is this really this? I don't understand that this is seasonal because, you know, indoors the temperature is going to fluctuate a little bit, but it's not going to go through 90s in the summer and 40s in the winter kind of thing. How important is it the time of year that we begin?
So great question. If you're going to grow greens indoors, whether you have a great light or you're going to use grow lights, no, the temperature and seasons won't necessarily matter then. So that's kind of the exception to that rule. If you're going to take some stuff outside, then it's better to know the seasons. But indoors, greens, herbs, microgreens, those all can be pretty much grown year-round indoors.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you're talking more, your guidebooks include outdoor gardening. That's when you're referring to raised beds. And raised beds, if I understand it correctly, you build a frame, you know, nail some 2x4s together, and it sits pretty much on top. It might go down an inch or so or a half inch, but then you put dirt inside the frame. So the actual bed of soil, the garden, is raised. That's what a raised bed is. Am I correct about that?
Yes, you are correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we don't really think about raised beds indoors, do we? Or do we?
No, not necessarily. Indoors, you're going to be in containers or trays or pots.
Got it. This is really interesting, especially with the introduction that I read of your work, is that you're empowering people to take these, what are really baby steps. You know, at first it seems so awkward because you don't know how to do it, and right. But once you've got it down, it's not difficult at all, is it?
No, it's not difficult. I think we have an overwhelm that starts with it, and this theory that we have a black thumb. There's no such thing as a black thumb. Anybody can grow greens. You know, it is relatively easy. It's light, it's nutrients, and it's watering, right? So we start out with a good foundation, make sure we're keeping it watered, and make sure we're giving it sunlight. And plants are resilient. You'll be surprised how well you can grow.
You know, I'm noticing that your reference to growing vegetables and things has a strong emphasis on greens. And why do you talk or emphasize, at least here in the beginning, so much about greens as opposed to peppers and tomatoes and cucumbers and things?
Because those are the easiest things to get started on. So as far as people not becoming overwhelmed or, you know, getting defeated, and because you can spread out the seasons a little bit longer on those, that's kind of where I always like to start. I mean, the fruiting vegetables are amazing. You can still grow those in pots, and you can still grow those in containers. Not maybe so great indoors unless you had a little greenhouse. But they are as equally important. I mean, I probably grow over 100 different varieties of things throughout the season. So I do believe that the fruiting plants are very important. It's just sometimes people tend to get overwhelmed and they start to take up more space. So people that are, are short on space, I don't want that to be a deterrent to just at least try to grow a little bit of something.
I received a beautiful birthday gift a year ago from some friends, and I don't know the name of it, but it was an oval shaped base about 2 feet tall with four PVC like pipes coming up, and then it had four lights around all the way around it. And there were holes in the PVC pipe to put plugs of soil that seeds went into in there. And it was a beautiful gift. And I got very excited about it. And then as I opened it the next day or a couple of days later, put it together, and it talked about the app to use. And there was an app that would tell me when it needs watering and when it's time to harvest and all of that. And so, oh, that's good. So I downloaded the app, and it was something like $30 or $40 a month to pay for the app. And I said, I'm not doing that. I'm just not going to do that. So I called my friends and said, thank you so much for the beautiful gift. That was really kind of you. And I'm really touched. It's a great concept, but I'm not going to pay $39 a month for them to monitor when I need to water this thing, or whatever it was. Are there home kits that people can use like that? Do you talk about that in your video courses?
I do not talk about this specifically, but in the free herb guide, when you sign up for my newsletter, there is something, it's called a garden tower. So it's, again, great for small spaces, and it has little areas where you can plant different types of plants. It's compact. And so that's, again, another great entry level thing that you can add to your deck outside your door. That works really well for small spaces.
Yeah.
And great. Again, just make it part of your routine. What I see is I grab my coffee or tea in the morning and I take my walk through the garden and I check the soil. And if I need to water, I need to water. It doesn't take a lot, but just incorporating that in your daily routine, I think it will add a lot of value, not just the food, but just getting outside and being with your plants becomes kind of addicting.
It sounds like it would be. I haven't had a garden for a few years, but I really enjoyed it when we did. It was I don't know that well, yeah, I'll tell you. We have deer where we lived, and when my son was 4 and 5 years old, he used to love to go out, Dad, the garden, because we go out to the garden and we would pee around the outside of the garden, so it keeps the deer away, right? And a little boy, it was like a really fun thing to do. Said, no, not on the tomato plants, around on the sides, but not on the plants. And I don't think my son has a garden today. He's in his 40s now, early 40s, but it was a memorable time for us, and we had lots of beautiful harvests from that. One of the measures of the value of plants is the amount of polyphenols in the plants, the colors that come out of different plants, and they're nutrients that we as humans get a great deal of benefit from. And many of these polyphenols in plants are the stress hormone of the plant. For example, in red wine, Pinot Noir is a red wine, and Pinot Noir has the second highest amount of polyphenols in any red wines. The wine that comes from Sicily is number one. I don't remember the name of that grape, but Pinot Noir has very high levels of polyphenols that are really good for humans. And it's called resveratrol. And resveratrol is a stress hormone that the plant produces. And the reason that Pinot Noir has one of the highest amounts of resveratrol in the grape is because it has a really thin skin. And when the grapes are growing, a wind comes along and they're blowing a little bit and they get bounced around. That's a stress to the plant. And so the plant makes more resveratrol, because the skin of the grape is thinner in Pinot Noir grapes than in other grapes. Does that same concept of stress hormones in lettuces and other vegetables occur where the polyphenols are the stress hormone of the plant?
That's a good question. I actually don't have a very good answer for that.
I think it is.
And you might be right. And it's funny, like when you brought that up, the first parallel that came to mind was like buying organic seeds versus conventional, because they've lived through the stresses, like you said, of wind, rain,
Right.
all of those things. And so they're going to survive. They're going to be a little bit stronger when you go ahead and grow them. And it's kind of what you're saying. Those stressors in the environment have created that for that plant.
That's one of the, values of organic, is that they tend to produce more of the stress hormones. And that was one of my concerns about hydroponics.
Yeah.
Is that hydroponics are grown indoors and it's a perfect environment and perfect amount of water, and the nutrient values have been all figured out, but there's no stress for these plants.
Yeah.
And I remember years ago, I met a hydroponic farmer and we talked about that. I said, yeah, you're absolutely right. Very few people know about this, very few. And I said, well, what do you deal with? How do you deal with that? He got big fans on all four sides of his greenhouse for the hydroponics, and they were big fans that get so he would turn those things on and the plants would start blowing a little bit, in the breeze. It's a stress hormone, and the tomatoes would produce more stress. They were just delicious tomatoes, really delicious, because they had more of the stress hormones in them. Especially tomatoes is really good to do that with, because the stress hormone in tomatoes is called lycopene, which is great for prostates. Every man should be eating a tomato sauce type product once or twice a week, because the concentration of the stress hormone in tomatoes, called lycopene, it concentrates when you cook the tomatoes down. There's more of it, and it's great for men that have any type of prostate concern. But where I went with all that was the big fans. I remember the big fans to blow the plants a little bit, not too much. It's not a tornado in there, but it's enough to create a little bit of stress for them. Any other tips for indoor growing that helps produce a healthier, stronger, more tasty plant?
I think, let's just talk about whether we're doing microgreens or salad greens. Really making sure that you're sourcing a high quality soil medium or high quality compost, adding some worm castings to that, really getting that nutrient density high. Particularly with greens, we're harvesting when they're small. Microgreens, we're harvesting them even smaller, which they pack a lot of punch with nutrients because they're being harvested in that first 7 to 14 days. Where you think of that plant when it grows into a full broccoli or whatever the plant is supposed to be, those nutrients are spread out throughout that, versus you're getting them in such a small little bite. So I think one of the biggest things is not just going to buy some Miracle Grow mix or something at your local big box store, is to look around and see locally if you can find a high quality compost or growing medium.
Mm-hmm. And what are microgreens? You've referred to them a few times. What, for people that don't know, what are microgreens?
Yeah, so microgreens are greens that have been harvested before they've matured. So usually about 7 to 10 days. So you'll see like little greens, people sprinkle them on their salad and soups, and I grow them in flats. And so they have a high nutrient density. When I can't get high quality greens and I'm frozen here in Wisconsin, I grow lots of flats of them under grow lights. Not to be confused with sprouts, microgreens grow in soil. I prefer to grow things in soil, so not in water. And they can be broccoli, a great way to get some herbs in the winters, to grow cilantro or basil microgreens. We can't necessarily find those, locally in the store. Radishes, kale microgreens. It's a great way, again, to add a lot of nutrient punch in a small way and to get your greens into your diet daily.
Oh, that sounds excellent. My mouth is starting to water a little bit. A little hungry. Anne asks, you mentioned composting. Please talk about how you do that.
So we do compost. Our garden is very, very, very large, so I can't produce enough compost to feed my garden. But if you have a small composter, I recommend one that is completely sealed and that you can roll and rotate, that heats up pretty good, that's insulated well. And then you can go ahead and repurpose that. And every time you go to replant something in a pot or in a bed, you should always add more compost, because that new plant should have a fresh beginning. And so whether you're doing your own compost or you're buying it from somewhere, every time I plant, I'm adding a fresh layer of compost to make sure they're starting out in the best medium, because those previous plants have taken a lot of the nutrients out of that existing base. So making sure that you're doing that. So if you're going to go ahead and compost on your own, great. If not, research a high quality local compost.
And when I think of composting, I think of poop, and I think of smell, and I think of, oh man, I don't want that. So, I can't bring that in my house. It's going to smell bad. Is that what we're talking about?
Well, in theory, if you're composting correctly, there shouldn't be a smell. If there's a smell, that means something's off. Either it could be too wet, it could be too dry. And getting that ratio right takes a little bit of practice when you're at, it kind of depends on what you're eating too, right? If you're having a lot of watermelon in the summer, it's gonna be high water content. So making sure you're adding those brown things back in. So it does become a little bit of a balance. And I think that's something each person kind of needs to learn when they're composting and what they're eating when they're adding to it. But yeah, you can, when you have open bin systems in your backyard, it can smell, it can attract animals. And so there's a little bit of a negative connotation with that. That's why I recommend like a sealed bin system.
I got a device called a Lomi, Lomi, and it sits on our counter, and we put our table scraps of vegetables and things after a meal. We put them in the Lomi, and when we go to bed at night, we turn it on, and the next day we've got composted material. It's all done.
Do you love that device?
Very much, very much. Yeah. Now we've after about 3 weeks, the fan or the motor broke or something, and it took about a month to get a new one. But company was great. They sent us and said, "Sorry for the inconvenience, and we'll have a new one out to you tomorrow." And they did, and it was really simple to exchange it out, that one part, and it works great. And I think it's pretty potent, because if I put too much on some of my houseplants, I just sprinkle it in there, and the houseplants had a reaction like, "Whoa, that's too much. That's too much." You have to be conscious of how potent these things are.
Yes, you can have too much of a good thing. That is true.
Yeah. Margaret's on Facebook. She says, "Can you tell me what is compost? I'm new to this. Thanks."
Yes, so it's a lot of organic matter that's been broken down. It's usually has a good nutrient density. So we can think of it as being leaves, materials, sticks. Sometimes people will do just yard type waste as far as composting that down, or like leaves. I believe in adding, different food scraps, brown materials. So all of that is broken down over time. It usually has to reach a certain temperature for it to be efficient. Make sure they're killing any weed seed if you're using any outside materials, things like that. And then again, think of it as an additional soil medium. So you have topsoil, which is more of the clay, silty, and sand. And then that organic matter is what really helps the soil breathe, those organisms breathe, all the microbes in there. And so we want to make sure we have a balance of that when we go to grow.
Yep. So Margaret, I learned about compost when I was 19. I went to visit a friend who was working on a dairy farm in upstate New York, and I spent a summer there. And we were milking cows twice a day, and I got to drive the tractor with the little scoop on the front end to push the cow manure, and clean it up. Now that's a whole level of composting you don't want to know about, right?
That's
But
right.
composting is taking stuff that grows. So it's called organic matter, like leaves and stalks and plants, or in your kitchen, it's the outer hard part of cauliflower. You break that stuff off and you throw it away. That stuff, you just put it in a pile, and all of that stuff will break down, and it breaks down into this material that's almost like soil, and eventually it looks like soil. And if you're doing it in the traditional way that composters do it, you put it in a container, and as we're talking about here, closed container is better. And they've got these things, and you turn it, every day or every couple of days. You just turn it a little bit, keep moving it around. If you're outside on a farm, you might use a shovel, and you're turning it with a shovel, whatever. I did some of that at our house in Chicago. I had a big compost area. But what happens is the stuff breaks down, it decays. And when it decays, it's all of that organic material. When it breaks down, you then mix it with the soil after it's gone through its thing. And depending on what you're using, it takes a while for it to break down. The loamy, it takes one night, and the next day you've got it. But eventually it'll break down, and that is just so rich, full of calcium and magnesium and all the minerals that plants need. So you mix it into the fresh soil, and now you've got super soil. Now it's ready to grow, and that's why we're saying that anytime you're planting new plants in your soil, you always want to add a little bit of compost to it, so that you're recharging it. Because as the plants grow in the soil, the plants take up some of the minerals into the plant. That means that the soil is a little less full of those minerals. So it's like putting fertilizer back into the soil again. Am I saying that okay, Katie? Is that in the right ballpark?
Perfectly, yes.
Okay. Jane's on Zoom, and she asked, why does Katie prefer to grow things in soil rather than water?
Oh, that's a good question. I just believe that hydroponically, I think soil is the foundation of gardening. And I think that it's important for us to play in the dirt. There's a study, we can talk about that in Finland, when they did a bunch of daycare centers, how it helps your microbiome when you're playing in the dirt. So that's why I think it's very helpful to get your hands in the soil. I know that what's in my soil, I've taken very good care of it versus adding things to the water. I'm not well versed on hydroponics. I've toured some facilities. I just like the more natural form of how we grow in the dirt. It's just my preferred method. But I say grow how you want to grow and what you have the bandwidth to grow, because I think as long as you're growing something, that's better than nothing.
Yeah, amen to that. I read a study many years ago, I think it was in the 80s, that family homes without a dishwasher have 35% less asthma. Kids with asthma, 35% when there's no dishwasher. And you say, what? And what's that about? Well, it's because when you're washing the dishes at night or after a meal by hand, there's like a little bit of crud left on the fork in between the prongs of the fork, and you don't see it. You put it in the drying rack, or you dry it with a towel and put it in the drawer. Then your kid's using that one. Well, there's a little bit of bacteria in that crud, so your kid's getting inoculated with bacteria, and it helps his immune system get stronger. There's no toxic stuff in the food you're eating, but you don't want to be careless. You always want to wash your dishes and things, but it's called the hygiene theory. And we learned about this back in the 70s and 80s, that the more sterile the environment, which was really brought up to us growing up. I remember Mr. Clean, all the commercials with this bald-headed guy that looked like a genie, super strong, Mr. Clean, and you clean everything, you make it sterile. And we were led to believe that's the healthiest thing you can do. It's not, absolutely not. Our immune systems have to be worked a little bit on a regular basis. And the more they have to work, the stronger and more resilient they get to fight the bad guys. That's the bottom line. So this idea of having some plants that you grow in your windowsill, if you don't have an outside garden, if you don't have a balcony, some people have a little bit of land outside. Some people have giant gardens like Katie does, which is great. but for all of us, I mean, everybody can take a pot and put it in the window and grow some basil. Everybody can do that. And that might be where you start. You know, maybe you watch Katie's video classes or 4 video class series, and you say, all right, you know, I'm going to try this. And you might start with a couple of pots in the window and you grow parsley and you grow basil and you grow rosemary. And you take the rosemary, you know, it grows up. Oh, look, it's growing. Oh, great. And then you like pick some of the little, they're not leaves with rosemary, they're like little reds. I don't know what to call them. But you take those and you like grind them up, or you chop them up a little bit, and you put them in your potatoes that you're making for dinner. And oh my God, all of a sudden you're in a fancy restaurant. You're eating food that tastes really great. And you feel proud that you did this. I mean, it's just the simple things, but you're also getting the nutrients from this freshly grown herbs that you're putting in your food, and you get the bacteria. It's growing in your house, which is healthy for you and helps your kids have stronger immune systems. I mean, there are so many benefits to growing a pot in the window. I mean, if that's where you start, that's where you start. And you look back in 5 years, because now your whole house, every window's got plants in it, you know, whatever happens for you, but you'll see that this is not so hard to do. It's actually a really great idea. B asks, I've heard that some veggies grow better together. What plants grow well together to increase my success rate? I've heard that too, you know, like with tomatoes, you plant marigolds around tomatoes and it keeps some kind of bug away. Are there tips like that, Katie, that you recommend?
So there's some companion planting suggestions out there. My philosophy is that I want to create the best little micro or this little ecosystem in my garden as possible. So I want to make sure I have different colors, textures, and smells, because we forget that 98% of insects are either beneficial and or neutral. That's a high percentage. And so what we want, Mother Nature will work with us. And so the more diversity that we have in our garden, because we don't have all the real estate sometimes to plant things that we may not want to eat that might be a companion plant for this. So I say create diversity within what you love to eat and what you bring in, because you will attract the pollinators, the beneficial insects, and Mother Nature will work with you. So that's my recommendation, and that is how I plant.
Great, great. Mary asks, if I want to get started with gardening and supplementing my groceries, what do you recommend to get started? What should I consider as far as what to grow? What do other things I have to consider? Mary, I'm pretty sure that's going to be covered in this video series, but Katie, would you like to answer that question?
So first, I think that you should start out with growing what you currently eat. I see a lot of people that just pick random things. So you should grow what you eat, or grow things that are going to support your health goals is where I like to start out with people. So really determining what it is that you eat regularly that you can supplement, or maybe that's a little bit more costly for you. And then just determining what space requirements you're going to need, and then what seasons you're going to plant in. So working backwards a little bit with that. And then the book does talk you through that.
Margaret asks, hello, Katie, I live in Florida with a small outside area. Any suggestions on porch veggies?
Yeah, I mean, you can grow a lot of different veggies on your porch. So we talked about greens. You can do some tomatoes, peppers, some eggplant. Any of those types of plants would go great on a patio. You can intermix some edible flowers with them. Vining plants might be a little tricky. Just put a cute trellis in your pot for the cucumbers and things that like to climb. Just make sure you're supporting any plants that are vertical. But you can do a lot on your patio.
You know, when I'm driving somewhere past an apartment complex where there's a whole bunch of balconies, and you can see the people that are more attuned with nature. You know, all of a sudden you see, oh, look at all the beautiful flowers on that balcony. You know, there's nothing. All of a sudden there's 4 or 5 plants and they're flowering. I mean, what a nice little environment that person is creating. So Margaret, pick things that you like, and just get started and give it a shot. Margaret also says, I have pets. Are there any veggies that are toxic to dogs?
Oh, well, I have 2 dogs and they eat constantly out of my garden. So you might have to share a little bit. I can't think of anything that it's super toxic, not necessarily toxic that they eat. I mean, mint might not be great, but mine don't really touch it, but they will snack on cucumbers and sugar snap peas right off the vine. Carrots, green beans, they snack on. Strawberries, they snack on. So more so veggie dogs than I think are more of a deterrent. I can't think of anything that off the top of my head that's terrible.
Susan on Zoom says, does it matter what type of planter? I've seen on YouTube of wicking planting on a balcony using plastic containers. It seems like a great idea since plastic containers are waterproof and won't leak. Is there danger of BPA leaching into the plants?
I suppose there could be a danger depending on how it gets. So the self-wicking, I'm assuming you're talking about is like a bottom watering system. Those are trending pretty much right now. I don't have a problem, just if it's a self-wicking system, that's fine. If it's not, make sure you have drainage holes in the bottom when you're watering. So if you do get a heavy rain or something outside, the plants aren't getting waterlogged. But you can grow either way, top or bottom.
Great. Jane asks, why does Katie prefer to grow things in soil? Or did I ask you that question already?
We did.
Why does Katie prefer? Yeah, we did. Okay, we'll bypass that one then. We've already done it. So I'm thrilled by this idea. Now, this idea of microgreens in your apartment. So you're talking about like a flat tray. Am I correct? They're about the tray's about 2 inches thick with soil in it.
That is correct. Yep, about an inch and a half of soil in the bottom. And you can heavily spread the seeds in. I mean, you can go anywhere from sunflower sprouts to carrot sprout, anything. And you're going to have them in about 7 to 14 days. You'll be able to start harvesting those microgreens. So sometimes your under cabinet lights might be enough. You can get a real economic grow light that hooks onto your counter. They're like $25. You can put that over it.
Wow.
But they're a quick turnover. So you could start one tray and a week later start another, or divide it in half, do some broccoli and do some sunflower sprouts on one side. There are so many options: cabbage sprouts, parsley,
radishes,
carrots, radishes, amaranth, watercress, you name it. Whatever you love, you can get real creative with microgreens.
Wow, that's a fabulous idea, and it wouldn't take much space at all with an under cabinet light on the kitchen counter. Watercress, for those that don't know, is one of the most nutrient-rich plants that's available. The amount of polyphenols and antioxidants in watercress is second to none. And you have them grow for a week and then just snip them. I assume you use a pair of scissors and just snip them.
Little pair of scissors, little pair of pruners, and snip them.
Yeah. And you mix them in your salad. And I mean, I grew sprouts for a while back in undergrad days, and I know what you mean about preferring the soil. Microgreens are growing in soil. I've not seen the studies on microgreens. I just haven't looked. But the studies on sprouts were jaw-dropping, just how powerful they are, and the anti-cancer benefit and the anti-autoimmune disease benefits of eating sprouts. Those studies started coming out back in the 70s and 80s and have continued to come out. And I'm sure the same kind of studies are available on microgreens, and they'll probably be even more nutrient rich because the microgreens are not only generating their own benefits in the plant, but they're taking the nutrient from the soil. So they're getting both there. So that's a great way to start. Maybe it's with a couple of trays under a kitchen counter or on the kitchen counter under the cabinets, and you put the lights up under the cabinets. And Marzi bought these lights for under the kitchen cabinets where we are now. And there was like a real strong adhesive tape on one side, and it just sticks on there. And then the light has a magnet that goes onto that mounted base. So, and she takes the light off and plugs it into a USB port to charge it every 2 or 3 days, and then just goes back underneath. And these particular lights, they're motion lights. So when you walk by in the kitchen at night, they come on under the counter, if you want to get a glass of water or something like that. So there's all kinds of lighting that you can do like that. And it's to your preference on what you're using. I'm assuming in your video series you talk about microgreens and how to grow them. Is that correct?
I do have a little mini microgreen course that comes with it. Correct. So I walk through the steps of planting, growing, and the supplies that you need.
Maggie asks, I use regular potting soil for my plants and herbs. Is there one brand that is the best?
That really depends where you are geographically. I would look for an organic one, starting out with the Seed Omri listed. That would be where I would start with, is making sure that you're not using synthetic fertilizers when you're growing in them, is that you're using something more organic.
I've seen in hardware stores Miracle-Gro potting soil. Are we looking at a commercial non-organic source of potting soil there? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's not Miracle-Gro does have an organic line, I believe now. Again, I try to support like local or regional companies to my area. So I would look for the organic first. And then I would always have a bag, you can get them at any like Tractor Supply store, a bag of worm castings to mix in, to really give it that that little punch. It's a great way to support the plants. And so if you're not sure, have a bag of that on. A little bit goes a long way. And so you can sprinkle that in every time you plant, and that'll give you that extra boost too.
Now, we aren't talking about worms here. I mean, some people have no idea what you're referring to.
Worm castings is like the worm poop, essentially, of what it is. So it's super concentrated. And again, a little goes a long way. So you can add it to your garden, to your pots, to your microgreens. And so if you're unsure of what your growing medium is like, or you can't source something, that would be one suggestion that I would add to that.
So if you had a gallon bucket of soil, and you were going to put plants, use that soil for pots in your windowsill, how much worm castings do you put in a gallon bucket?
Oh, gosh.
Like a tablespoon? I mean, are we talking?
Probably maybe a quarter of a cup. Usually on the bag, it'll give you directions on the back, like how much, whatever square foot. But you're probably looking at a quarter cup. I would maybe mix in with it in the top couple inches. Depends, eighth of a cup maybe.
Yeah. So it's not much at all. You buy a bag of this stuff and it'll go a long way. Yes. You'll use it for quite a while.
That is correct.
That's really great. I'm envisioning you going out to your garden, and you got the boots, and you got the dogs running behind you, and all that's happening. And we're talking to people here that are probably living, many of them in suburban areas with maybe a little backyard, maybe not, living in a condo. So there's all different types, but the concept here is that you're getting started with something. And when you get started with whatever is appropriate for you, and you find, oh, look, this really works, and you like cut your first microgreens and you throw them in a salad, and you're wondering, you put your favorite salad dressing on it, and you say, okay, I'm going to try this, right? And for the first time, you say, oh, that's really good. Wow, that's pretty good. It's empowering. And then you want to do more.
It is. It's empowering. It becomes a little addicting. You want to grow more and more and more. And your palate changes. Like, it's hard to go back to the grocery store when you've been growing your own lettuce greens. They don't taste the same. So
right. I'm sure that's the case. Let's see. Lucia says, we grow all kinds of vegetables in our garden. So good, so fresh and organic. We also do compost for fertilizer. Everything grows best. Thank you, Lucia, for commenting on that. Oh, here's Quincy says, we love microgreens. Our kids think they're especially fun to decorate their plates with when we have them. And Lucia says, does not smell at all. So that's great. That's great to hear that those are some of the experiences people are having. It's I'm hoping everyone will register with the link here and take a look at what Katie's offering. I mean, this sounds so great. And I love in the introduction, it's about taking more control for yourself, doing the little baby steps. You know, I'm interviewing right now. We're going to be doing a docu-series, and Katie, I'm going to reach out to you after this and see if we can coordinate getting an interview from you for the docu-series. And there's so much technical information out there on everything now. You know, there's a thyroid summit, the detox summit, and there's so many different summits. What we're going to be talking about is how to empower people to take the baby steps, you know, to take the first steps. I don't care if you've got rheumatoid arthritis so bad you can't walk and you're in a wheelchair. And I've had many patients like that, and they all get better. They all do. But it doesn't matter. But what's required to get healthier is that you take baby steps. You just start where you can start, and you take baby steps. I can't say it enough. Maybe that's what I'll call this, the docu-series, the baby step docu-series. Maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know what the name's going to be, but we're interviewing world-class scientists. I mean, I flew to Northern California to interview Dr. Dale Bredesen, who wrote the book, The End of Alzheimer's. And his newest research paper, they reversed Alzheimer's in 100 patients. 100 patients. And it's just startling to see what's possible now when you learn how to change lifestyle and stop throwing gasoline on the fire. But this is an important component to that. This concept of microgreens that anyone can do is really a great one. So everyone, the link is here. Please register for Katie's information series and just take a look, see what you think. And Katie, thank you so much for being available today. And this is really interesting. I hope this is something that everyone picks up on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to chat with you tonight.
Really a pleasure. Really a pleasure. All right, everyone. We'll